Let's talk about the evidence for evolution. My students and I came up with this graphic organizer and a learning tool called FAB MAE, FAB MAE. Each one of those stands for one part of our graphic organizer. F stands for fossils, A stands for anatomical, B stands for biogeography, M stands for molecular, A stands for adaptation, and E stands for evolution in action. Let's start with fossils. Fossils are a record of life. Fossils are basically bones and hard parts of organisms that have been replaced by minerals. They're actually rock. This shows a change over time. We can actually see what are called transitional fossils between, for example, fish and the early amphibians. We can see the limb buds. It's a fascinating science. We also can date things using radiometric dating, also known as carbon dating. Two other terms related to fossils are relative age, meaning fossils that are found underneath another fossil would definitely be older. Likewise, the law of superposition. Super means above, position means location, so older stuff tends to be deeper. Let's look at anatomical structures. Similar anatomical structures tends to indicate that they had a common ancestor. For example, things called homologous structures mean they have the same structure and the same function. So if we look at the wing of a bird, a bat, the front flipper in a whale and a fish, as well as the arm on a human, the front arm on a dog or a cat, they all have the same exact bones, and they also have the same function. They're used for locomotion. Another structure are vestigial structures. These are remnants of a use used long time ago. However, they're still there. For example, humans still have wisdom teeth. Also, there are hip bones found in whales and snakes. Another field of study is the embryonic development of organisms, specifically the vertebrates. If you look at them at a similar stage in development, they all kind of look like cocktail shrimp. They have limb buds, they have somites, they have a large eye. They all look almost exactly the same, and it's very hard to distinguish the difference among them. And that's evidence of an anatomical relationship. Moving forward in FAB MAE, the B stands for biogeography. Basically, it means life distribution. Similar organisms live in similar environments. For example, there's the founder effect, where a small population starts a new colony. They could be washed ashore in a large raft of grass and debris, and they end up in a new location. The most well-known area of study for this are the Galapagos Islands, where we've studied Darwin's finches. A small population of finches ended up out there, and they diversified based on the food availability throughout the islands. You can also see it in the adaptation of the Canary Island lizards, where they changed in size and shape. And even here in the United States, we can see the California ringed salamanders that came down from the north. And depending on which side of the desert they traveled around, we can see similarities and differences in how they evolved over time. Scientists also look at molecular similarities among organisms. Molecules such as DNA, RNA, proteins, and enzymes all show that they work similarly, thus all of these organisms came from a common ancestor. There are a couple of tools that we also use, something called the molecular clock. Scientists actually can calculate the rate of mutation among different phylum. We can also examine homeotic genes, which is basically a genetic code found within the DNA. And the same genetic code puts the head on a fly, a dog, a human, a horse. It's exactly the same DNA. We also examine mitochondrial DNA. Mitochondrial DNA is DNA found in the mitochondria, which is passed down through the maternal line. We use this to trace human origins. Another A is adaptation, and this is the adjustment of organisms to their environment. meaning the organism can't change itself, but if they have the correct adaptations that allow them to survive and reproduce, also known as natural selection and survival of the fittest. Some adaptations consist of mimicry, where an organism looks like another organism. For example, a stick insect resembles a twig on a branch. We also have some insects that resemble wasps or bees, so that organisms think that they're ferocious. And we also have camouflage, where organism can blend in with their environment. A lot of our birds can have this, as well as an Arctic fox. It changes its fur color with the seasons. It's white in the winter and brown in the summer. The last part of FAB MAE is evolution in action. And this is where humans have directly observed change. For example, insects have become resistant to DDT. A lot of our weeds have become immune to Roundup. We've also seen antibiotic resistance found in bacteria. Also, during the Industrial Revolution in Europe, the peppered moth was traditionally white in color. Once the trees or the birch trees became covered in soot and smog, they actually, the ones that were darker in color tended to survive and pass on. And with the cleanup and clean air policies, they're now back to being white on the birch trees. Here in the United States, we've seen the rock pocket mouse that usually lives in fields with brown background. However, if there are lava flows out there, they tend to turn a darker color, or the ones with a darker color tend to survive. That's it for FAB MAE.